Chapter 216, The Same Old Gathering. Klein started his first morning in Backland under cold and humid weather conditions, with a light fog that provided very little visibility. For breakfast, he had 1 liter worth of cheap tea, costing 1 penny, and 2 pieces of toast with inferior butter in the center. He was busy the entire morning, but he first went to the Cherwood Borough's Backland Bulletin to post a tiny advertisement for a month at the cost of £30. From Tuesday, the Backland Bulletin's loyal readers would see a tiny advertisement along the seams of its 7th and 8th page. Sherlock Moriarty, good at various types of private investigations, reasonable prices, and strictly adheres to the principles of confidentiality. Resides at Cherwood Borough's 15 Minsk Street. The reason why Klein didn't choose major newspapers like the Tussock Times or the Backland Daily Tribune, that had a readership all across the entirety of the Lowen Kingdom, was due to the fact that his business was temporarily limited to Backland. Furthermore, he didn't wish for a sterling reputation. Therefore, the Backland Bulletin, which was well received locally and had low advertisement fees, became his first choice. After leaving the Backland Bulletin's headquarters, Klein took out a map and followed it to purchase various herb powders and silver slices from various herbal stores, flower stores, jewelry stores, and accessory stores. He did it in preparation for holding a ritual. When items that didn't have any spirituality were involved, most of the materials and mysticism could be purchased from ordinary stores. However, they weren't all under one roof, requiring him to visit many stores to collect them. To do so, Klein spent another £5. The humongous sum of £200 that he withdrew broke below the £100 mark, leaving him only with £92. He thought,
spending money is as easy as drinking water.
Klein found a small cafeteria nearby and ordered a black pepper steak worth 8 pence. He returned to 15 Minsk Street at 1 in the afternoon, and without rest, he spent his time using slumber flower, dragon bloodgrass, dark red sandalwood, and mint powders to create holy night powder, a key ingredient needed to create a wall of spirituality. He could only make do with this method until he bought a real silver ritual dagger. Klein speculated that he would have to advance to Sequence 7 before he could do away with this restriction. Klein laid back on his bed in the bedroom and thought about all sorts of things.
Phew, Miss Justice, Mr. Hanged Man, and the Sun haven't requested for leave yet. The gathering will be held on time today. I wonder what surprises Mr. Hanged Man will bring me, and how many pages of Roselle's diary he can provide.
To him, a private detective was a career that took into account both money and action. It allowed him to get in touch with people from all walks of life and slowly discover the Beyonder Circle in Backland. From there, he could slowly find clues regarding the secret order. Of course, if he was lucky, he would even be able to figure out the Sequence 7, which corresponded to the clown through a particular circle of Beyonders, and buy the corresponding potion formula and main ingredients. As for Insangwo's whereabouts, Klein temporarily chose not to take the initiative to seek him out. He might even avoid him a little. However, if he were to accidentally discover this enemy of his without exposing himself, he wouldn't mind doing a good deed and sending an anonymous letter to the Church of Evernight. With this in mind, Klein suddenly sat up. He came to the first floor and began reading the various newspapers he bought in passing.
A private detective's income can, at most, support a middle-class standard of living. If I want enough money to buy the potion formula and Beyonder materials, it will either depend on Miss Justice, or it will be through investments with the remaining £100 that I have left in my anonymous account. Yes, I can't touch the £92 that I have for the time being. Perhaps I wouldn't be having any income for some time.
These newspapers often carried news about what had been invented and required investments, or how someone wished to form a joint venture with others to do a particular business. Klein relied on his knowledge from Earth and his understanding of this era to carefully sift through the projects. Unfortunately, none of the ones on the papers today were reliable. At 15 minutes to 3, he returned to his bedroom, locked the door, drew the curtains, and used holy night powder to create a wall of spirituality. Klein took 4 steps counterclockwise and arrived above the gray fog. He sat in the high-back chair belonging to the Fool before extending his spirituality and touching the crimson star that symbolized the sun as if he was responding to a prayer. He suddenly sighed.
This is one of the few things in my new life that hasn't changed.
In an area outside of the city of Silver, in a grayish-black tower that was half collapsed, 9 members of a patrol squad were gathered around a blazing bonfire, chatting about their experiences in the past few days. There were also a few other team members guarding the perimeter, prepared for any possible attacks that might break out from the darkness. Many of the City of Silver's Beyonders had used their blood to teach them a lesson. At all times, never let your guard down. The monsters in the darkness could very well be right behind you. On a night when the frequency of lightning was very low, it was necessary to keep the flames burning and the light shining. Once they were completely enveloped in darkness, it wasn't impossible for them to all disappear. No one could say for sure just what terrible things would happen in total darkness, because reality had broken the limits of their imagination time and time again. Derek Berg remained reserved and silent as he quietly listened to his companions, reminiscing about the monster they had encountered before. It was a humanoid monster with eyes covering its entire body. In order to finish off the monster, their patrolling team suffered a heavy price with 5 injured, and 2 of them severely injured. Suddenly, Derek's vision blurred, and he felt himself being enveloped in a thick gray mist. In an inexplicably faraway place, in the depths of the gray fog, a blurry figure sat on an ancient high-backed chair, looking down at him. The fool's voice echoed in Derek's ears, but none of his teammates were aware of it. He said,
Prepare for the gathering.
After withdrawing his gaze and observing the area for more than 10 seconds, Derek moved to the very edge of the fire, leaned against the broken wall, and pretended to be asleep. Ever since he found out that the members of the 6-member council and Elder Lovia were unable to discover the existence of Mr. Fool, he gradually believed that as long as he didn't carelessly reveal any clues, he would be able to quietly attend the Tarot Club's gathering above the gray fog, even under the gaze of others. Backland, Empress Borough. Using the excuse that she was tired, Audrey returned to her bedroom. She curbed her excitement and didn't pace back and forth. Instead, she sat quietly on the bed, waiting for Mr. Fool's summoning. She thought with sparkling eyes.
Father was busy communicating with the other members of Parliament about the proposed bill, and the Beyonder Guard isn't tailing me constantly. Thank you, Goddess. My life has finally returned to normal. 2 weeks have passed. Mr. Hanged Man must have prepared the pituitary gland of a mature rainbow salamander. I'm about to advance to sequence 8.
To her, this was even more exciting and worth looking forward to than the 30,000-pound bounty and the large plantation worth at least 8,000 pounds. Finally, she saw the familiar, illusory crimson surge towards her like a tidal wave, drowning her, on an ancient-looking sailboat. Alger Wilson locked the door to the captain's cabin and sat behind a sextant and the ship logs. He kept memorizing the contents of the thick stack of sheets in front of him. After the investigations, he left the bustle of Backland without any qualms, after being rewarded by the upper echelons and returned to the sea, carrying a batch of secretly copied Roselle diary pages. Alger shook his head, suddenly distracted.
After digesting the Seafarer potion, I'll be able to advance normally. My contributions are enough for me to trade for the formula and ingredients. However, this will expose the fact that I know the acting method. There are advantages and disadvantages.
At that moment, he felt the summoning of the Fool. His mind suddenly recalled the face of Vice Admiral Hurricane Kulongos, whose flesh and blood quickly rotted as pieces of his face peeled off. Alger instinctively lowered his head, allowing the crimson tide to engulf him. Above the gray fog, inside the palace that looked like a giant's residence. Having activated his spirit vision, Klein examined Justice, the Hanged Man, and the Sun to confirm their current states. Audrey was about to happily greet everyone when she suddenly saw the Hanged Man gesturing to her before rushing to speak before her.
Mr. Fool, I've obtained 19 pages of Roselle's diary this time. Here, I must thank you for sending your blessed to help me get rid of Kulongos. These diary pages will be the compensation I should pay.
Klein didn't talk much about the blessed as he smiled faintly. He thought,
19 pages? Not bad. That is the principle of equivalent exchange.
Audrey had begun to use the word he, him, or his to refer to the Fool without realizing it. She thought,
as expected of Mr. Fool. A pirate admiral with a mystical item was nothing to him. From the looks of it, I don't have to mention my claiming of the bounty. I wonder how many high-sequence Beyonders Mr. Fool has as his blessed.
Upon hearing the fool's answer, Alger said humbly,
The limit of my current memory is 6 pages. Please allow me to give them to you over separate occasions.
Klein, who was surrounded by thick gray fog, nodded gently.
No problem.
The son Derek looked at the pages that appeared before the hanged man and was very curious about the contents of the diary. With his previous experiences, he believed that the items that Mr. Fool was interested in definitely contained many mysteries. He looked at Miss Justice, and when he saw that she didn't have the impulse to ask, he cautiously maintained his silence. Soon, the 6 pages of the diary were complete and came into Klein's hands. Audrey and the others began to wait quietly. They were already used to such things. Klein looked down and read the first page. 16th December. I managed to contact the pathetic fellow who's trapped in the storm and was lost in the darkness. Klein was delighted, and he became more focused. He thought,
Finally, there's a follow-up to one of the previous pages of the diary.
He called himself Mr. Door and tried to teach me a complicated and difficult ritual. He wanted me to help him return to the real world and promised to fulfill 3 of my requests. Does he think I'm stupid? I've lived for more than 60 years over my 2 lives. Does he think I can't tell that this is the usual manipulation done by evil gods and devils? But the history of the 4th epoch that he described was truly interesting. Chapter 217, Mr. Door's Description.
Mr. Door. This naming style is very similar to mine. I wonder what was the real name of this pathetic fellow who was lost and trapped in the deep darkness amidst the storms is, and what his sequence is. Or rather, just as Emperor Roselle had guessed, he's one of the evil gods or devils.
Klein let out a silent chuckle, which was mixed with ridicule and self-deprecating humor. He was also interested in the history of the 4th epoch.
I know of the most famous War of the 4 Emperors in the 4th epoch, but the specific details and the main figures involved are limited to the information spread by the major churches. For example, the Black Emperor of the Solomon Empire. It wasn't until today that this so-called Mr. Door finally answered my questions by letting me know who the remaining 3 emperors are. The half-insane Blood Emperor of the Tudor dynasty, the Night Emperor of the Trunsoist Empire, and the Emperor of the Underworld of the Southern Continent, also known as Death. According to Mr. Door's description, in this war that changed the situation of the entire world, the Black Emperor, Blood Emperor, and Night Emperor fell, one after another. The Emperor of the Underworld reaped the greatest benefits. Having said that, Mr. Door added with profound significance that after over a century of digestion, Death went mad, but he also became stronger. Therefore, Death teamed up with the primordial demoness and brought about a pale disaster for the northern continent. Of course, this isn't something he witnessed personally, but rather something that he hears when he comes close to the real world every month. Death went mad, but also became stronger. Even deities can go mad? What a horrifying sentence. However, this also confirms my guess. Before the 5th epoch, those deities would often descend into the real world, directly interfering with the situation in the northern and southern continents. They might even personally appear just like Death. I asked Mr. Door if he had participated in the War of the 4 Emperors. If so, what role did he play? And what was the position the 7 deities maintained in this war? What role did they play? Mr. Door didn't answer my question. He only said in a teasing manner that the number of preeminent mighty figures in the 4th epoch far exceeds my imagination. In addition, he also mentioned 2 laws. One is the law of Beyonder characteristics indestructibility, and the other is the law of similar sequence Beyonder characteristics conservation, which is consistent with certain things that I have learned from that most secret and ancient organization, and also from some of the phenomena I have observed. This can lead to many interesting conclusions, making many explanations take on other forms, making one's mind tremble in horror. For example, when there are too many high-sequence beyonders in the same sequence pathway, the low-sequence beyonders would reduce, and vice versa. The beyonder characteristics had been fixed at the source. It will not increase or decrease. Does this mean that there really is a God who created all the deities, an omnipotent and omniscient God, and everything originated from him?
This was the longest Roselle diary that Klein had ever seen. It took up 2 full pages, and one could imagine that it originally came on a double-sided page. It only became 2 separate pages after repeated copying.
That's a lot of information.
Klein sighed silently. As a history student who had graduated normally, he had always believed that the Solomon Empire, the Tudor dynasty, and the Trunsoist Empire came one after the other in a line, with a certain degree of restoration before a new political outcome was established. To his surprise, the War of the Four Emperors, described by Mr. Dorr, clearly and unambiguously revealed one thing: all 3 empires had existed at the same time. If this were true, then it would really overturn most of the current research on the 4th epoch in the field of history. Klein suddenly thought of the original Klein, who was filled with interest towards archaeology and the history regarding the 4th epoch.
Today, I've helped him achieve his wish. I wonder if death had already become a true deity during the War of the Four Emperors. It's hard to determine, according to Mr. Dorr's descriptions. I can only first assume that the Emperor of the Underworld, who had obtained benefits from the War of the Four Emperors, had broken through his limits and become a deity, but he also went mad as a result. To have a deity go mad was truly terrifying. Just thinking about the details makes one tremble from the bottom of their heart. It's no wonder that the knowledgeable Emperor Roselle would use the word horrifying to describe this matter. Could it be that the so-called evil gods were crazy Orthodox deities? Would that mean that there might only be evil gods left in this world one day? Man, does this mean that the end of days cannot be stopped?
Klein smiled to hide the growing solemnity of his emotions. He felt that the future he imagined was filled with a dark gray hue. At the same time, he raised his evaluation of the Black Emperor, Blood Emperor, and Night Emperor, believing them to be the preeminent mighty figures who were close to being deities.
Perhaps that means Sequence 1 is the peak existence of a single pathway. According to this logic, for Black Emperor to live for centuries or over a millennium wouldn't be unacceptable. That would explain the original Klein's confusion. He had obtained contradictory findings from the content recorded in the Antigonus family's notebook with his own mentor's viewpoint. He believed that the Black Emperor was the common name used by every emperor of the Solomon Empire. Perhaps the Black Emperor had always been the same Black Emperor. Of course, other possibilities cannot be eliminated. For example, they could have been replaced 2 or 3 times. But is the name of that pathway Sequence 1 Black Emperor? I wonder who Mr. Dorr is in the history of the 4th epoch. Emperor Roselle didn't go into detail when describing his erroneous experiments and accidental coincidences, making it impossible for me to even try to converse with that Mr. Dorr. The laws of beyonder characteristics indestructibility and similar sequence beyonder characteristics conservation shares the same description as the one used by the captain. Perhaps the term he used came from Emperor Roselle. According to the 2 laws described by Mr. Dorr, we can indeed deduce a lot of interesting speculations. For example, with there being so many holy artifacts and high-sequence beyonders in the 7 churches, there shouldn't be many low-sequence beyonders. But this contradicts reality, and the only reasonable explanation is an additional gift from the deities? For example, is the destruction of the nation of the Evernight due to the conservation of characteristics, that the mere possession of resources causes it to be in trouble? Or could it be said that their existence seriously weakens the potency of the Evernight pathway and threatens the position of the goddess? For example, theoretically speaking, certain sealed artifacts could also be used as the main ingredients for potion materials, or they can even be considered equivalent to potions. Of course, the prerequisite is to remove all latent dangers and madness. No wonder the documents that were unearthed called the 4th epoch, the epoch of the gods. So it turns out that in this epoch, there are many records of deities descending. Then what caused them to stop coming, to the point of there not being any revelations? If it wasn't for the fact that beyonders receive responses from ritualistic magic, perhaps many of them would have doubted the existence of the deities.
Many ideas came to Klein suddenly as he felt that he had delved deeper into the realm of mysticism in this beyonder world. He flipped through the next 4 pages and was disappointed to realize that they were no longer related to Mr. Dorr. His ability as a clown allowed him to conceal his emotions well, and coupled with the gray fog's obstruction, even Audrey, who was secretly observing him, didn't notice anything amiss. He gathered his chaotic thoughts and started reading the 3rd page of the diary.
10th September. I've endured it for a long time, but I still can't help but complain a little. I must have had fucking shit for brains to chose the savant path, right? Of course, this has indeed allowed me to develop my greatest advantage, allowing the church to attach great importance to me. But the problem is that the first few sequences lack any beyonder powers needed for combat. I can only make do by relying on mystical items and rely way too much on external items. For example, Sequence 9, Savant only has extraordinary abilities in memory, learning, and practical skills. For example, Sequence 8, Archaeologist, gains a strong physique and corresponding ancient knowledge, and they can only barely apply some ritualistic magic. For example, Sequence 7, Appraiser, whose ability is to quickly identify mystical objects, allowing them to avoid hidden dangers to the greatest extent. For example, Sequence 6, Artisan, who can produce machinery wonder but not very powerful beyonder objects. Apart from that, one's standard in ritualistic magic will be enhanced. It's no wonder its modern name is Machinery Specialist. Comparatively speaking, the Sequence 7 Warlock and Sequence 6 Scrolls Professor of the Mystery Prior Pathway are sufficiently tempting. It would be great if only the church has the complete sequence, and that the hidden sage doesn't exist. However, I finally received some good news. After I advance again, I'll gain beyonder powers, combat powers that I can call my own. Sequence 5, Astromancer. Its modern name scares me a little. It's actually called Astronomer. Am I going to end up as an all-powerful mad scientist? Heavens have mercy on me. I was only a second-tier student at the college entrance examination.
It had to be said that Emperor Roselle had a strange talent for making jokes. Even the recently dispirited Klein couldn't help but twitch his mouth, wishing to light a candle for this senior.
Study hard and improve by the day is indeed a wise saying.
He lampooned and remembered the unique trait of the Church of the God of Steam and Machinery. They lacked beyonder powers when it came to combat, but they were good at making and using items. After flipping to the 3rd page of the diary, Klein continued reading.
2nd June, the kingdom has created chaos again and again, instigating wars, without being able to completely destroy the Faesac Empire, the Loan Kingdom, and the Phaenopotter Kingdom. As such, the kingdom has no choice but to shoulder huge debts, and its economy is on the verge of collapse. From my observations, the people, merchants and soldiers are very dissatisfied. The riots are just lacking a spark. This is my chance, but I have to be very careful. The Sauron family has witnessed the history of the 4th epoch and is an ancient family with a high possibility of having high-sequence beyonders. I need the support of the church, as well as gain a tacit agreement with the Church of the Eternal Blazing Sun. I can't appear immediately. First, I'll let the rebels destroy order before I end it all as a protector. Consul Roselle Gustave. I like that name.
Chapter 218, Free General Knowledge.
June 3rd. After discussing with Edwards and the others, I gave up on the idea of reaching a tacit understanding with the Church of the Eternal Blazing Sun. This might very well reveal my true intentions, making the Sauron family and the ancient nobles who support them aware of them in advance and carry out a direct approach. That would make matters extremely difficult and dangerous. It's a pity that Grimm died in the Sea of Fog. He was the smartest among us. Descend into chaos. Descend! Only with everything in chaos will I get the chance to fish in troubled waters. Only when the Sauron family is incapable of handling this situation will the Church of the Eternal Blazing Sun reluctantly acknowledge me. Perhaps I should give some help to those rebels, but how should I conceal myself so that no one would notice? June 4th. Zaratul from the Secret Order came to visit me in incognito very suddenly.
And then? Klein was just feeling intrigued over the reason why Zaratul, leader of the Secret Order, would seek Roselle on the eve of the rebellion and coup d'état when he realized that the two subsequent pages had nothing to do with it. This made him feel a sense of irrepressible anger. Although the 3 diary pages didn't provide very detailed descriptions, with rather straightforward accounts from Roselle, Klein could still feel the famous turmoil in Intis that happened in 1173, more than 100 years ago. The outcome was clearly recorded in history textbooks. As a colonel, Roselle quashed the rebellion and enacted political changes. The Intis kingdom was transformed into a republic, with him acting as a self-appointed consul. In the following 19 years, he reformed the penal code, encouraged inventions, and protected the Industrial Revolution. He greatly increased the country's strength and fought wars both north and south, making Lemberg, Masson, Sagar, and other countries protectorates under the Intis Republic. He also made the 3 mighty countries on the northern continent, the Faesac Empire, the Loan Kingdom, and the Fenapater Kingdom, bow their heads. At the end of 1192, almost 20 years after his appointment as consul, Roselle converted the Republic into an empire, declaring himself Caesar. Less than 6 years later, he perished in the White Maple Palace, ending the 5th epoc's most legendary piece of history to date. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that there was more to Roselle's death than what appeared on the surface. It was just like how this famous historical event definitely had power struggles amongst Beyonders behind it, and that a Beyonder faction had leveled the situation, unlike the descriptions in textbooks. As expected, one of the so-called 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, Grimm, died in the Sea of Fog.
In a previous diary page, Roselle had written that there was something wrong with this horseman. It seems to have something to do with the tiny island where they discovered many extraordinary beings. Not only was it a fortuitous encounter, but it was also a dangerous one.
Klein thought of a previous entry and turned to the 5th page, feeling emotional. The contents of this page are of little value. They consist of Roselle's comments after drinking an 1128 Ormir red wine, the disillusion of finding the woman who had gained his adoration in his youth to be aged and out of shape, as well as a degenerate summary of a certain period when he was addicted to playing cards. The 6th page was about the same as the first one, with accounts of his daily life. However, the last one made Klein's eyes light up.
8th April. I have to send someone to investigate the secret order to get more information. I can't repeat my passiveness from before. I can't let Zaratul lead me by the nose anymore.
So, did you discover anything, Comrade Roselle? Since Klein couldn't find the rest of the information, he could only force himself to calm down and wait for the next gathering when the hanged man would hand over another 6 pages. He knew that an investigation from over 100 years ago was unlikely to help him find any clues related to the Secret Order Association. After all, over such a long period of time, other than the special ones, many of the high-sequence Beyonders would have already died of old age, not to mention the middle or low-level members. However, Klein believed that this would help him obtain inspiration and grasp the precise identity and activity patterns that the Secret Order often used. Putting down the 6 diary pages, Klein tapped his right index finger on the edge of the long bronze table, slowly moving his gaze from Miss Justice to the hanged man, and then to the sun. Right in the diary just now, there was a line Emperor Roselle described.
God who created all the deities, an omnipotent and omniscient God. This is very similar to the customs of the City of Silver. Where did he hear this from? Could it be from that most ancient and secret organization which controls the world from behind the scenes? This organization was established before the forsaken land of God was forsaken.
Suddenly, Klein had a new idea. He said with a low and gentle smile,
Roselle mentioned some hidden history in his diary and mentioned some simple, general knowledge. The latter reminded me of something that I don't recall informing you all.
Audrey suddenly fell into a trance. She immediately turned her body around and looked at the very top of the ancient long table in pleasant surprise. Mr. Fool is taking the initiative to mention the contents of Roselle's diary? What would it say? She was so excited and thrilled that she completely forgot that she was a spectator. Compared to her, the hanged man, Alger, was much more composed. However, the subconscious straightening of his back heartlessly betrayed him. Only the son, Derek, had always believed that the items of interest to Mr. Fool contained many mysteries, but he didn't know anything about Emperor Roselle and didn't know what this name represented in the northern continent. Thus, he just found it difficult to hide his curiosity and didn't reveal any unusual behavior.
Mr. Fool, did Emperor Roselle mention some general knowledge? I'm willing to pay for this information. However, I want it to be communicated to me privately.
Klein chuckled and said,
There's no need. This is very simple general knowledge. After reading this part of the diary, as the summoner of the Tarot Club, I feel it's necessary to let all of you know this. Of course, I'm very certain that some of you are already aware of this.
He was mainly referring to the sun. The City of Silver had a history of 2,000 to 3,000 years, so it was impossible for them to not discover the law of Beyonder characteristics, indestructibility. Moreover, they were in a relatively extreme environment. Even if the surrounding areas had no lack of monsters in the darkness, there would still be times when they failed to obtain the corresponding materials. In order to pass on their heritage, in order for their city to continue on, using the Beyonder characteristics of the remains of their predecessors to create a potion wasn't particularly unacceptable. To them, this was perhaps a sacred and glorious ceremony. Of course, Klein could see from a previous exchange that the hanged man knew something.
It's a pity that misjustice cannot always be made to pay in gold pounds and transfer the money to my blessed. My blessed can't appear any less impressive. I mustn't destroy the image of the powerful man that Mr. Azek has created. Yes, I'll give it a try when I have the chance. After all, no matter how powerful a being is, they'll have subordinates that run errands. For instance, the Evernight Goddess is sleepless. No one would ever suspect that the Evernight Goddess isn't a true deity, just because the low-level Nighthawks are weak.
Klein sighed silently.
Thank you very much. Mr. Fool, you are just too generous.
Audrey replied in joy. She was originally feeling 3 seconds of regret for the coarse action of using cash to purchase the information. Klein stopped rapping the table and described with a calm voice.
The first piece of general knowledge, law of Beyonder characteristics, indestructibility. The characteristics of a Beyonder is never destroyed or reduced. It's only passed from one carrier to the next. Without realizing it, I used captain's tone.
Klein's lips subconsciously curled upwards. It cannot be destroyed or reduced. It just transfers from one carrier to another. Audrey ruminated over Mr. Fool's description, feeling that there was too much meaning in that simple sentence. Her emerald green eyes turned, and when she saw that neither the hanged man nor the sun showed any signs of surprise or contemplation, she immediately understood that these two members of the Tarot Club had long known of this law.
Only I didn't know.
She thought, feeling somewhat aggrieved, but she quickly began to praise Mr. Fool for his kindness. At this point, Klein added,
After a rampager dies, they will leave behind an item of Beyonder characteristics. It could be the main ingredient, or it could be a mystical artifact that requires sealing. An ordinary Beyonder's death results in similar results. However, the item left behind will be equivalent to the corresponding potion without the supplementary ingredients. Of course, the item alone will contain Beyonder powers. They can be used as a half-mystical object.
The plain and indifferent words instantly echoed in Audrey's mind. Layers stacked upon layers and, bit by bit, it eventually reached a crescendo. Audrey thought of cannibalism and the question, would a sequence pathway be severed if the source of Beyonder materials ceased to exist? She had asked. The hanged man previously came to mind. Now she knew the answer, but she would have rather not heard it. She felt like she was having a nightmare.
How can it be so cruel? Why is it so dark? Audrey had previously seen some bad situations that involved Beyonders, but those situations were only caused by a person's own perverse and evil nature. For example, Mr. A or Kilangos. They didn't affect her yearning and love for mysticism and the Beyonder world. However, this time, she discovered that the mystical world was filled with grayness and darkness. Wake up, Audrey. You can't be naive. Consider that the cruelty and darkness described by Mr. Fool are predictable. Since I've chosen this path, I have to bravely walk down it.
Audrey consoled herself, easing her mood a little. She saw that the Hanged Man and the Sun were making only habitual movements and appeared to understand what had just been said.
HMPH. Mr. Hanged Man is terrible. He even wanted to use this information as an exchange previously. Ugh. This information is indeed worth a lot and is quite important, but it's only a simple piece of general knowledge to us and Mr. Fool.
Audrey suddenly wanted to laugh a little. Her mood began to improve, and she slowly pushed all the extreme examples that she had just thought of aside. Klein wasn't surprised by the three members' reaction. He continued in a calm tone.
The second piece of general knowledge, law of similar sequence beyond characteristics conservation.
Law of similar sequence beyond characteristics conservation. The Hanged Man slightly changed his sitting posture. He felt that he understood something, but he was unable to fully understand what this law represented and what it consisted of. Justice and the Sun shared the same feelings as he did. They were unable to directly understand the true meaning behind this law.
Why similar sequence?
Alger couldn't help asking. Klein smiled and replied,
What do you wish to pay for the answer?
One of the ideas he had was that general knowledge was free, but any explanation required a fee. This both matched his status and didn't waste the information. Free things cost the most. Chapter 219, Explanation. If the Fool had simply mentioned that there was some simple general knowledge contained in Roselle's diary, the Hanged Man, Alger, wouldn't necessarily be determined to pay the price for the answer, partly because the description of it being simple killed his curiosity. Another aspect stemmed from his constant wariness against making trades with the Fool, as it reminded him of the examples when deals were made with evil gods and devils. But now that he knew the so-called contents of simple general knowledge, his interest was piqued. Yet he was unable to understand parts of the description, much less gain any actual or deep grasp of the concept. Therefore, he couldn't hold back his urges to ask in absolute reverence,
Mr. Fool, what kind of payment do you want?
Yes.
Justice Audrey nodded her head nearly indiscernibly but very frequently, indicating that this was something she wanted to ask as well. Although the Sunderic remained silent and didn't make any additional body gestures, the look he gave to the Fool explained everything. Klein, who was waiting for such a response, smiled and said,
Information regarding the secret order.
The secret order.
The Hanged Man, Alger muttered to himself. He wasn't unfamiliar with this term. He had once received payment for explaining to Miss Justice about many secret organizations, including the Secret Order. Audrey and Derek both frowned subconsciously. The former's only understanding of the Secret Order was limited to what the Hanged Man had described, and the latter had never even heard of such an organization. Klein had long anticipated what the Sun would feel, but he wasn't surprised. According to his conjecture, the area where the City of Silver was located should have been a part of the Third Epoch after the appearance of the first blasphemy slate and before the appearance of the second blasphemy slate. It was even possible that it was the direct catalyst or manifestation of the cataclysm. The Zaratul family had only stepped onto the stage of history in the Fourth Epoch, and the Secret Order was created in the latter half of the Fourth Epoch. There was no way both entities could have existed in the same period. It would surprise Klein if the Sun were to know about the Secret Order. He would then have to overturn some of his speculations, reconstruct his knowledge of the City of Silver, the Forsaken Land of God, and the Zaratul family. After nearly 20 seconds of silence, Alger looked at the Fool in the gray fog, deliberated his words, and said,
I will accept this request and help you gather information regarding the secret order. Can you make payment in advance?
It wasn't surprising that a suspected deity was interested in an ancient and secret organization. Therefore, Alger wasn't puzzled about it. More importantly, after many gatherings, he had a guess in his mind, which was that Mr. Fool's state wasn't perfect, that he might be in a predicament, that all his attempts and the actions of his blessed on the northern and southern continents were to help him break free from his confines. This might even be related to the huge secret of why the 7 deities no longer descend upon the real world after the 4th epoch. A thought flashed through Algier's mind, and he shuddered as he felt himself entering the realm of the gods. Upon hearing the hangman's request, Klein leaned back in his chair and nodded.
No problem. If the information you have collected exceeds the value of the answer, I will provide you with further compensation. As for the circumstances in which the value of the answer was lacking, it is naturally up to the esteemed Mr. Fool to decide. If he has the ability to make the additional payment, so be it. If not, forget it.
Klein silently added. Justice Audrey's eyes lit up all of a sudden. She raised her hand and said,
I want to partake in this deal.
Klein laughed and replied,
Sure.
Frankly speaking, his main target was Miss Justice, because she was a local of Backland, and she had mixed herself into several Beyonder circles. Her access to information in the Land of Hope far exceeded his, considering it was his first time in the capital. She was also more informed than the hanged man, who was out at sea most of the time. According to the earlier revelation he received from his divination, Klein believed that the clues related to the secret order would appear in Backland and not anywhere else. The son Derek listened quietly and after some thought said,
I'm willing to use the payment I reserved and exchange it for the answer.
In the previous 3-way deal, he had traded the Sequence 8 Telepathist formula for Sequence 9 Bard. Klein had promised to compensate him, and his choice at the time had been to save it up and prepare for the subsequent potion formulas and main ingredients. Klein nodded his head and gave an explanation that he had long prepared.
The so-called similar sequence refers to how high sequence beyonders are exchangeable with other pathways. Let me give an example. The Death Pathway Sequence 5 Gatekeeper can not only be advanced normally, but one can also choose the Giant Pathway, which is the Gatekeeper Pathway's Sequence 4 Demon Hunter. This won't lead to the danger of losing control, nor will it accumulate madness. It's different from taking the wrong potion. Of course, if it's not a similar sequence, a semi-deranged state is the best result.
Exchangeable?
Audrey blurted out, surprised and delighted. She was surprised that sequence pathways weren't completely fixed, that they didn't need to follow the original path all the way. The price of switching wasn't being semi-deranged and never to advance again. Within the 22 paths of the divine, there were special circumstances and sequences which were similar. And what delighted her was that she had another chance to choose again in the future. It was just like being able to select something that caught her interest at Philip's department store. It was a wonderful experience.
So that's how it is.
Algier silently muttered to himself, suddenly feeling like he had understood several things at once, and he had resolved many of the doubts accumulated in his past experiences.
This information is way too valuable, as expected of Mr. Fool. So-called simple general knowledge is enough to shock and awe most low-sequence beyonders and benefit them immensely.
He sighed inwardly. Derek the son was a little disappointed because he had no intention of changing sequences. He wanted to be the sun that lit up the darkness and dispelled the curse. However, he quickly recalled an incident that happened in the City of Silver. The former chief, a powerhouse who had the greatest possibility of breaking past the limitations of Demon Hunter, had built a mausoleum for himself and went deep inside, making it his home. Afterwards, he appeared less and less, until the main door of the mausoleum could no longer be opened. Back then, the citizens of the City of Silver all believed that a problem had arisen during the chief's advancement and that he had gone mad, to the point of being close to losing control. He was believed to have finished himself off. Now, combined with the description from the fool, the son suddenly thought of another possibility.
That chief might have been attempting to advance in sequence through a similar pathway. In one of his explorations deep into the darkness, he had acquired the corresponding formula for the death pathway, and the mausoleum might have been a special requirement. But in the end, he still failed. But why didn't he turn into a monster? What did he encounter in that dark mausoleum? The City of Silver doesn't have the subsequent sequence potion formulas after Demon Hunter?
As these thoughts crossed his mind, Derek was suddenly jolted back to his senses by Miss Justice's reserved voice.
Mr. Fool, May I ask what other pathways are exchangeable with the spectator sequencer pathway? Sequence 4, Demon Hunter, sounds pretty good. That's very suitable for me. Very suitable for justice.
Audrey admired the first high sequence name that she knew.
I want to know too.
Klein was tempted to answer Miss Justice's question in such a manner. Before he could say anything, Audrey added in a faltering tone,
I can pay for the answer to this question. How many gold pounds do you think is enough? I believe that your blessed will need a certain amount of funds for their activities.
Having said that, she recalled how Mr. Fool's Blessed had easily finished Pirate Admiral Colangos, who possessed creeping hunger. Clearly, he was a high-sequence beyonder, so she nearly said, I apologize. Mr. Fool, treat it as though I never said a thing. A te. However, since she had already asked, she couldn't back down.
Come on, Audrey. Perhaps the fool has a weaker blessed?
Audrey quietly bit at her lips, silently encouraging herself.
Gold pounds?
Klein thought about it seriously and said,
We'll make the transaction after enough information about the secret order is gathered.
As he spoke, he recalled his informant in the Psychology Alchemists, Daxter Guderian.
Captain and I. Sigh. Daxter's identity as an informant can no longer be verified. I wonder if it's a tragedy or a comedy. It's a pity that I can no longer contact him anymore. Otherwise, it would be the most convenient way to obtain the information regarding the spectator pathway from him.
Klein smirked.
All right.
Audrey answered happily. The conversation between the two made the hanged man, who was about to ask a similar question, shut his mouth. He left it until he had gathered enough information on the secret order. After a brief silence, Audrey turned her head to look at Mr. Fool and raised her hand very slightly. After receiving a nod of confirmation, she turned to the member opposite her and asked with a sense of anticipation,
Mr. Hanged Man, my tip allowed you to finish Vice Admiral Hurricane. Have you prepared the complete pituitary gland of a mature rainbow salamander?
That's one of the reasons why I returned to the sea.
Alger nodded gently and said,
I've gotten the Beyonder material you wanted, but how should I give it to you?
How? How should it be given to me?
Audrey froze for a moment as she lost herself in thought.
It's impossible to just give my address. Nor can I go through CO and Force. That will reveal the fact that I'm a Beyonder. It's not impossible. Emperor Roselle once said that when we should choose the lesser of two evils.
At that moment, Klein's heart stirred. He lightly tapped the edge of the long table and smiled.
Miss, sir, are you willing to cooperate with me in making an attempt regarding this matter?
Chapter 220, Klein's Sacrificial Trial. Justice was instantly thrilled as she nodded her, acting reserved and elegant. She said,
Attempt? I'm very willing to cooperate.
As a spectator, she clearly remembered that Mr. Fool had only used the word attempt on two things. The first time involved bringing her and the hanged man into this mysterious space, and the second time was when they were given an honorary name so that they could attempt to make a prayer. And the outcome was sufficiently successful, revealing his true nature. What would it be this time? It really is something to look forward to. Audrey restrained her impatience and tried her best to behave as a qualified spectator. Attempt. Alger suddenly tensed up, viewing the fool's proposal with utmost wariness. One by one, thoughts popped up in his mind.
What does he want to do? What is his true purpose? Is this good or bad for me?
The rapidly rotting appearance of Vice Admiral Hurricane Quilango surfaced in Alger's mind. Finally, he lowered his head and respectfully replied,
Your wish is my wish.
Beside him, Derek looked at the hanged man and then at Justice, wondering why they were so sensitive to this so-called attempt. Klein lightly tapped his fingers on the edge of the long bronze table and smiled.
This attempt will make your transaction easier and safer, and it will definitely be sufficiently confidential.
He turned his head to the side and looked at the hanged man. He said with a moderate pace,
Do you remember the sacrificial ritual described by the sun?
Klein had deliberately mentioned it to show how open he was. It made it difficult for the members of the Tarot Club to imagine that the sacrificial ritual he was about to provide had actually first been obtained from the sun, and that he had gone through all that time and effort back then to trick the sun out of a template sacrificial ritual.
I remember. I do come into contact with such things usually.
Alger answered truthfully, but his heart was throbbing. Since the Orthodox gods rarely responded to similar rituals, the word sacrifice had often been equated to evil gods and devils in the Fifth Epoch. Thinking about how this could lead to a terrifying outcome, the hanged man felt as if he was walking at the edge of the abyss. If he wasn't careful, he would fall in, only to be eroded and devoured. Klein followed his plans and didn't provide further explanations. He nodded slightly and said,
My idea is for you to sacrifice the Beyonder material to me through the ritual, and I'll bestow them to Miss Justice. A transaction like this will be beneficial for both of you.
That can be done? Audrey was instantly dumbfounded. She felt that this exceeded the limits of her imagination. But she very quickly came to her senses and understood the advantages of this method and the true nature of a deity hidden behind this simple act.
Mr. Fool is great. As expected, our Tarot Club will be different from the other secret organizations. We'll use the method of deities to exchange for material goods and ingredients.
Audrey almost said, "Praise the lady," in her mind out of habit, but in the end she said, "Praise Mr. Fool instead." Alger turned even warier as he entered a state of calm thoughts. He said,
Honorable Mr. Fool, what do I need to do?
He tried to figure out the true purpose of the Fool from the process of the sacrificial ritual. Klein lightly pressed his right hand and said,
Like I said, this is only an attempt. It might not succeed, so it will need your cooperation. First of all, prepare an altar. There's no need to make it too complicated. It can be very simple and crude. The only requirement is to engrave or draw this symbol.
As he spoke, a screen of light appeared in front of him. On it was the symbol of the hidden pupilless eye and the mysterious symbol of the partial contorted lines, the same symbol on the back of the Fool's chair. After previous experiments without using materials with spirituality, Klein was certain that the sacrificial ritual he designed could create an illusory gate above the gray fog, similar to the door of summoning. However, his strength alone couldn't construct a stable channel, and he could only use the uniqueness of the mysterious space above the gray fog to complete the sacrifice. Therefore, he was 90% confident that the ritual would be successful. The only problem was if an ordinary passageway could be constructed using ordinary materials that contained spirituality, or did it need to be Beyonder materials as well as a sufficient number of them?
I'll let Miss Justice and Mr. Hanged Man bear the cost of this experiment. In any case, they knew from the very beginning that the Tarot Club was a product of an attempt. It can be foreseen that there would be other attempts subsequently, and failure is inevitable. Even deities are no exception.
Klein decided to transfer the costs. As the Hanged Man, Justice, and the Sun were attempting to memorize the symbol, Klein chuckled.
If you forget, you can pray to me, and then you can remember.
All right.
Audrey answered happily. She thought happily.
With Mr. Fool, rituals aren't tedious and troublesome.
The Hanged Man nodded in response as Klein continued the description.
Secondly, follow the normal procedure, but there's no need to burn any more additional herbs or apply the holy oil. There's no restriction on time, just chanting my name is enough. Remember, use ancient Hermes or Yodin to recite this piece of prayer. Your devoted servant prays for your attention. I pray for you to take his offerings. I pray for you to open the gates to your kingdom. After you finish chanting, combine the materials that contain spirituality with the natural power created by the incantation, and await my response. If you don't succeed in this step, change from materials containing spirituality to Beyonder materials, and try again from the beginning.
After listening quietly to the procedure, Alger felt that his previous guess was very likely to be the truth. The Fool was in a predicament. He offered alluring attempts, making attempts one step at a time, and planned to use himself, Justice, and the Sun to slowly break free of the restrictions. In the end, he might even descend into the real world. This was also the true reason why he had initially pulled people into this mysterious space, agreeing to the establishment of the Tarot Club. Even without this previous speculation, Alger believed that he would have come to the same conclusion after hearing of the experimental procedures required after the sacrificial ritual and comparing it with the fool's previous attempts. The only thing that stumped him was the possession of a powerful blessed. Therefore, there was no need for him to use himself, Justice, and the Sun. His blessed could make similar attempts.
There must be secrets I don't know about yet. The attempts need to be sufficiently secretive. And perhaps his blessed is being watched by certain existences?
Alger began connecting the dots. After Klein finished describing the ritual, he asked in a low but gentle voice,
The sacrificial ritual needs a specific time. Mr. Hanged Man, when do you plan on making the attempt?
This was different from responding to a request which could have a delayed response. The stable passage created by the sacrificial ritual could only exist for a very short period of time, so Klein had to wait above the gray fog ahead of time.
The rainbow salamander's pituitary gland is the only Beyonder material I have with me for the time being. As for materials with spirituality, I do have quite a lot. Mr. Fool, once the gathering ends, I'll immediately attempt the first scenario. If it fails, I'll seek out other Beyonder materials. Once I obtain anything, I'll inform you by praying to confirm a time.
Alger said as he couldn't help but turn his gaze towards Miss Justice. As a spectator, Audrey instantly understood what he meant. She answered without the slightest hesitation.
If any additional Beyonder materials are required, I'll compensate you afterward. Well, I can't guarantee the specific type of material you would want.
As expected of the wealthy Miss Justice.
The Fool? Klein couldn't help but sigh before chuckling.
We have come to an agreement.
He looked at Justice and said after some thought,
Once Mr. Hanged Man's attempt succeeds, I'll inform you of the bestowment ritual.
All right.
Audrey was entirely confident with Mr. Fool's abilities. After answering the question, a sudden thought struck her as she realized that the exchange of money could also be done through this method. Of course, this was only if the attempt was a success.
I wonder if items without any spirituality would work or not. I'll ask Mr. Fool again after the attempt is successful.
Audrey's lips curled as she thought of the beautiful future. With the sacrifice and bestowment topic coming to an end, she deliberated for a few seconds before saying,
Mr. Fool, I've found 2 ladies suitable for our tarot club. They're both Beyonders and have their own circle and resources in Backland. They're also able to keep a secret and have decent personalities. Are you willing to let them join the gathering?
Does Justice want to strengthen her faction within the Tarot Club?
This was the most instinctual thought that Alger had. Derek was very interested in this matter as he looked sideways at Mr. Fool, waiting for his answer in anticipation. Klein appeared to be in a bit of a dilemma. Previously, he had imagined that the members of the Tarot Club wouldn't know each other, and they would then develop their own subordinates, forming a relatively tight and secretive organization. This way, even if a certain member was exposed, captured, or had their spirit channeled, it wouldn't have much of an impact on the Tarot Club. But Miss Justice's description just happened to hit his weak spot. He was hoping to find clues regarding the secret order in Lenivus by acquainting himself with Beyonders with different circles and resources in Backland.
If it's done through justice, the person involved would eventually hold back. However, I'm not sure if it's possible to pull them up above the gray fog simply by reciting my name.
In order to maintain his image, Klein didn't think too much and instead procrastinated on it. He said calmly,
It will require a certain amount of examination. Miss Justice, use a clandestine method that wouldn't expose yourself to let them know of my name to garner interest in them.
When Audrey saw that her proposal was about to be accepted, she immediately responded in excitement.
Yes, Mr. Fool.
After a few more exchanges, the gathering came to an end. The sun, the hanged man, and justice returned, while Klein remained in the gray fog, waiting for the sacrifice.